Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Chris Jackson. And Fred wants to talk to me about something that he really likes and wants to see a lot more of. Is that right?
Yeah. Pretty much the avoidance of using the MTBF. So this was prompted by a message from not that I would like to, talk about this and all the ways we can eradicate it and all the other stuff. But this one was prompted by a person, David, who said, it started off with a very polite message that gets my attention. Absolutely love your website, articles, etc. I feel like I've been on a mission to lure people away from MTBF for about half my career. So I'm glad you finally caught on. It took you half your career, so hopefully it's going well now. And he said that he goes on and he talks about he's been working with a couple of aerospace companies, apparently as a consultant. And he says everybody, all the time, uses MTBF in the aerospace industry. It's just what they do. And in its large part, it's a reflection of what the FAA is expecting them to do parts count predictions and assume everything's exponential. And they don't. He said both companies, they don't talk about confidence. They don't talk about statistics at all, other than an MTBF, an average failure rate, essentially. They use fit rates whenever possible, if they can ever make one up. And they do no probability analysis. The basic calculations are always aimed at, it's just exponential. And they have primary assumptions. Both of them said, well, when he asked, why do you do this? He gets shown the traditional bathtub curve, and they are assuming that all of the functional testing and stress screening in production will completely eliminate all infant mortalities, and that the design and all of the long-term studies and stuff that they do to make sure the design lasts long enough. So therefore, without any evidence or confirmation or analysis, everything else must be in the flat part of the curve and just a constant hazard rate. And there's nothing we can do about it until, so we'll just always assume that all of the things that fail are due to totally random, exponentially described phenomena. And he says, now the question he had was, given that background, how do I talk to these people to let them see what they're doing is rather naive? I'm paraphrasing what he's done, but he's asked, is there an analysis that would help them understand what they're doing doesn't make sense? Or, how could they learn more from the failures by not making these assumptions? And how could basic probability analysis actually convince them that it's good for their business? And those are all good questions. And I think he's on the right track for ways to talk to these guys, but it's like, yeah, we've still got a long ways to go to get people off of MTBF.
I think that, unfortunately, if I was to be honest, I don't think he's going to enjoy any success in trying to revolutionize, which is what it will feel like, his organization.
Is it worth not trying then?
I don't know. That's what we're going to talk through in this podcast, though, isn't it? We'll see what happens. But the problem with it, we talk about culture in organizations a lot. Problem with this issue is that it's not just an organizational culture; it's an industry culture.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for statistics and whatnot, well, I like watching the show, which has got different names in different countries. In some countries, it's called Mayday. In some countries, it's called Air Crash Investigations. But they do a really good job of looking at particular aircraft crashes. Mm-hmm. And I haven't tallied up the root causes of each one. But if I had to hazard a guess, I'd say about a third of aircraft crashes are caused by a manufacturing issue. Some crack or inclusion or what have you was somehow present in a turbine blade, and it led to premature fatigue, and coupled with inadequate preventive maintenance or inspection.
Mm-hmm.
Combination of those two. I'd say another third is where there's some sort of wear out phenomena where, the insulation, for example, on cabling degrades, creating an arc, which then goes on to create a fire, for example.
Yep.
And I'd hazard a guess. Another third is human error, whether someone doesn't.
Well, there was one I saw the other day where they didn't latch the cowling on the engine cover, and on takeoff it flapped open and caught on fire.
You could argue it's easy to say that's human error, but sometimes designs can be more prone to human error than others.
Yeah.
What I never see in these air crash investigations is a scenario where there is a genuine constant hazard rate.
Yeah, a bird strike I would call that there's birds in the air, there's birds that are big enough to take down, knock out an engine. It's pretty much not a wear out, it's an overstress situation, right? Would you call that something that could be described by a constant hazard rate?
I would. You could get. For me, I would. You could argue that there are more birds in certain airports across the world,
and different migration patterns. Yeah.
But I take your point. It's a randomly occurring external stress, and it's interesting to note that the most popular or well-known bird strike, involved a safe landing. Anyway,
on the Hudson River.
On the Hudson River. So, but you look at everything else, and this is the problem. The FAA, NTSB, who work with the FAA in terms of investigating these crashes, they write detailed reports, they're pretty good at root cause analysis reports, which says, when this turbine was the turbine hub was being machined out, you could see that the drill bit dug in here, causing a micro crack, and blah, 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 off it goes.
Yep.
You go, all right, well, if you want the evidence to demonstrate that your aircraft are going to either have infant mortality and or wear out, just look at every single air crash investigation report that's ever been written by the same regulatory bodies that are telling you to use the constant hazard rate curve, or constant hazard rate model, that's why I'm quite pessimistic about his genuine chances of making substantial change, at least in the short term.
Yeah, no, it's a long game, and military has been facing the same thing, and there are pockets. There are a handful of folks I've met over the years that, no, we don't use that. We recognize that might be what the industry wants us to do, but we ask for the distribution, we ask for the analysis, we ask for this and that, and our systems are doing better. And those are the ones that don't make the news, the systems that are way over budget and overrun and don't work when they get to the field. They're using they're using let's use the at 217 parts count prediction. Let's call that reliability, and we're off. But David's got this issue of, how do I talk to him? And my primary advice is, if it's so ingrained in so much of what they do, it's got to make business sense for them to change. It's got to be in their own interest. So some of it is, and even if you're in the organization or you're consulting with them, is show them both. If they're not going to accept your work unless it has the MTBF value with 3 digits underlined at the bottom of the page. So give them that, and then go, and if this is going to be used to make any decisions, here's some other information that would actually help you make that decision appropriately. Because if you follow, and I've run into this in the oil industry, if you use MTBF, you will decide to ship this unit. If you use your own test data and analyze it with a simple Weibull plot, which I do this all the time, even managers can understand these things, and put it up on the wall, and they go, oh, well, that means we're not ready yet. And it's like, exactly. Here's your stated goal. Here's what MTBF says you are, which is pretty meaningless. And here's how many failures you're going to have on the day one, when you're on your installations in your first couple of months. And this is from your data. But when you assume that it's just the constant hazard rate and just calculate an MTBF, it looks great. So you are fooling yourself with this crazy way of doing math. You're just obscuring the information that you really need to make a decision. And some of them get it, and some of them say, thank you very much, goodbye. We're going to ship it anyway because that's what we wanted to do. And it's really tough when that industry they make their money on the repairs, and that's a completely different business model. But I've seen companies and I've worked with companies that, we can't make it too good, otherwise we won't make any profit.
Right.
And they are now out of business because somebody came along and said, well, here's a similar function that doesn't cost you a whole bunch of downtime, and we're not interested in repairing it. And so they get cut out of that business and they're gone. But so David asked these handful of different questions. And so my primary advice is do both and show them how the different information can lead to much more savvy business decisions than what you've had before. And it doesn't always work. It definitely doesn't. The other path I take is embarrass the hell out of anybody that mentions MTBF, but that doesn't get very far sometimes.
No. I mean, not a good question, but at least an interesting question. Well, suggestion is, okay, if you believe everything has a constant hazard rate, it doesn't wear out, let's eliminate all preventive maintenance. So eliminate all inspections, eliminate anything. We're trying to measure the accumulation of damage
because it doesn't matter.
If it has a constant hazard rate, it's never wearing out.
Yeah.
So let's tell the maintenance team they can go home.
Who's going to sign up for that?
Raise your hand. Yeah. Of course they're not, but by the same token, that's not going to achieve too much apart from if you're having a genuine heart-to-heart with a leader who's trying to understand the ramifications. If you're trying to convince people, that sort of it can often be too in your face, too confrontational, to look at me, how smart I am, look how dumb you are. But that's what it in practice means. If you are going to assume that everything has a constant hazard rate, then if you're a manager or a leader or a boss, well, put your money where your mouth is and just suspend all preventive maintenance and put your name next to that decision.
Yeah. No,
that goes.
Yeah, no, that's a great strategy. I think there's also the point of, especially in organizations that have a track record of just bad decisions. And so, the root cause is not that you made the wrong decision. You were using the information you had available, which all happened to be Mill Handbook 217 generated MTBF values. Now, meanwhile, we've got all this actual real data that if you take a look at it, you would probably have made different decisions and avoided these $48 million worth of fees that you've had to pay, or, losses that you've had to incur that were based on bad decisions. I think it's the comparison and how it could be different in my mind, is the way that I've actually gotten people to go, oh, geez, maybe we should get a copy of that software and do that analysis. Like, yeah, just get started. You've got the data, you have it, and now you're just smearing peanut butter all over it so it all looks bland. You just can't tell what it is anymore.
Peanut butter has that effect, does it?
Yeah, it does that. It is. But anyway, I was thinking of something else, but that's the idea. But the business case side of it, you got to understand the business model. And I've often heard the argument, especially in the aerospace and the oil industry, is that our systems are too complex to actually do anything else. And I'm like, that's just plain not true. You don't need the 47-digit Weibull analysis and physics of failure model for every single piece of equipment you have. And you've talked about it a lot, Chris, is what are the vital few? What are the things that are most at risk here? MTBF is just fine for the seat back tray so you can, set your drinks down on it. That's fine. But the attachment of the engine, the motors and the jets to your wings and the fuel distribution system and fire suppression systems, you might want to think about those a little better,
Well, it can't. I'm just trying not to be pessimistic, Fred. I'm sorry. I'm just trying not to be. But when this stuff is so ingrained, and there's so much personal risk with sticking your neck out and saying everything we've been doing now is wrong, and the management will roll their eyes and say, well, why the FAA say it then? How are you smarter than the FAA, or how are you smarter than the NTSB? Well,
yeah, no, it's like our last discussion is you don't go in and say everything you're doing is wrong. It's
right.
It's not up to the task that you have in front of you. If you need to make a decision of what design is the appropriate design for this wing attachment scheme, you need to really get it right. And you don't want to add a bunch of extra weight just for margin, just for peace of mind and everything else, but you also don't want to get it wrong. And are you going to use just some random averages and make a comparison? Or are you going to use a little bit better technique that's been in our ability toolkit? We've had the capability of doing this kind of analysis for like 100 years. Why don't we try that?
Well, going back to what you mentioned about complexity, and you have industries or organizations say, look, our stuff is too complex for us to do anything about it. Complexity actually offers a wonderful opportunity. And that opportunity is that we talk about the vital few, but you typically only need to touch a really small part of a complex system to have a drastic improvement in reliability, because you only have a few components which are ruining your day. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you look at an electronic component, a semiconductor, for example, I'm working with an organization that makes lasers for LiDAR, for example. Now, the diode which creates the laser beam is sophisticated but really simple. But it has 1 to 2 dominant failure mechanisms which describe every failure in a way.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so if you want to improve reliability, you need to fundamentally address the entire diode system, for lack of a better term. I know it's a component, but in this context, it's a simple system. You need to really look at the entire thing. Whereas if you're in a mining company and your engines are failing often, maybe it's the scavenge pump. And all you need to do is buy a different type of scavenge pump, and all of a sudden you haven't had to undergo a monstrous redesign to get drastic improvements in reliability.
Yep. And it's one of those things is look for those opportunities that make a real difference, and that builds I want to say confidence, but it's the trust in, this system works. Let's try it on the next level of things. I call it a beachhead type approach. Is you get one good success, you broadcast that amazingly and say, hey, look, these guys over here actually used the Weibull plot and they, saved $47 million compared to you guys over there. Well, avoid that last part. Is to say, hey, they're getting it right, and they're using a proven technology or technique of analyzing the data just a slightly different way without there's still assumptions involved, but they're not making the assumption that it's a constant hazard rate. And they made a better decision. And look how smart they are. Look how beneficial it is to their business and all concerned. And, the FAA sets the lower standard. This is the minimum you have to do.
Right.
Right. And it varies on what bar, where's that set. And they keep ratcheting it up. Apparently you couldn't design and build a 1950 Cessna as a new aircraft today because it would be deemed unairworthy. Yet there's still Cessnas built in the 50s that are flying today and doing just fine. But so they keep, it's like our cars, right? We have all this pollution control stuff on it, all the other safety features on it that 50 years ago, we didn't even have seatbelts. That was, a pleasure or add-on that we just don't need. But the idea is that you're not limited by the minimum in your organization or your industry. If you want to create products that actually work and serve your clients well and your customers well and operate your systems in a meaningful, fruitful way and are productive, pay attention to how you make decisions and get the appropriate data. And just waving your hand and going, everything is fine with MTBF is not always the right decision. And,
Mm-hmm.
and going in and saying, so how do you know this is all this way? And they'll say, well, we assume it is. And this is, so all of our data we collect and I actually had somebody tell me this. I have never seen a circumstance where anything was other than constant hazard rate. He says, well, how do you do the analysis? Well, I assume that it's all constant. And then I just tally up the failures and divide by the time. And I'm like, okay. It's like, no. It doesn't prove that it is if you just assume it is. Well, the calculations work just fine. Of course they do. I can put
Yeah, I know. But what you said about the FAA being, setting the minimum standard, it's actually a really good point, actually, because we have, you talked about cars and safety. We have federal motor vehicle safety standards. Essentially, they say if you create a car which complies with these design features, it gets to be called safe. And that means it's safe to be driven on the roads and everything else.
Roadworthy.
Dealers can sell it. Right. However, we all know that some cars are safer than other cars. And so we have this real dichotomy where we have this binary approach. Oh, is a car safe? Yes or no. The motor vehicle safety standards say it's safe? Yes/no. But when a consumer goes to purchase a car, you better believe safety rating is a big deal. And there are some cars which are way more safe than others. And how can that be if they all pass the same federal motor vehicle safety standards? The reason is there's no such thing as safe. There's no such thing as you can't standardize safety. And the same reason you can't standardize reliability is there's the truth. It's a measurable metric. It's not what the standard says you need to achieve. What the regulator says, if you do this, everything is going to be fantastic. It doesn't work like this. It's interpreted like that a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. But in the real world, there's no such thing as safe. There is things which are safer than others in some measurable way, and the same thing goes with all the scenarios you talked about. Is the part ready to ship? Yes or no? Well, if we use MTBF, the answer is yes. If we use this, we've got some work to do, and you've avoided disasters. It's just the whole idea of complying with a certain perspective means everything is okay. It's just not a thing.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I think that's where we, as an industry in the aerospace, and I've seen it in other industries, is just this reliance on, well, that's the numbers we need to use. That's what everybody's providing us. They will just do that, is missing the opportunity to make a system that's more reliable or better as service, provides a better function and value to your customers. Differentiating on the way you do the math is a really easy thing to do. In the big picture of stuff, doesn't mean you have to use titanium for everything. It means that you actually can make better decisions, and that's fundamental. That's the hard part for me is it's complex. Yeah, we got a lot to deal with. Yeah, that's, we've got great engineers, everything else. But I like your analogy of car safety, because there are cars that are just more reliable. There are cars that are just more safe, and same with reliability. And part of that is how we make decisions to make it happen. And that's contingent on the information that we're feeding into those decisions. So why aren't we using the best available techniques to expose the information we need or create the information we need? That's mind-boggling to me. So anyway, I think David's got a long haul view of this. He's got the right ideas. Appreciate the thought or question. Gave you a couple of ideas here. I sent a couple of them to you in email. But if you're listening to this, be like David. Send us a question and be like David and lure people away from using MTBF. That's another good thing to do. But let us know, how's the battle going where you are? Kind of, what's your thought on this, and what's worked for you to help people understand that there is a better way to, rather than making these bold assumptions about hazard rates. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. You can get in touch with us a couple of ways there. Chris and I and the other hosts of the show are available through LinkedIn and on our about pages. We all have contact information and ways to get in touch. So we look forward to hearing from you. And shout out to David. Thanks for the work you're doing and trying to help move an industry. It's going to take lots of us doing this in a steady pressure over time to make it happen, but it can happen. And I've seen it happen in a couple of industries so far. So I know we're making progress. Yeah, any more questions, let us know, and we'll look forward to chatting again. Any final thoughts there, Chris?
I don't know. It's just an ongoing frustration. And again, when you've got an industry culture to deal with, it's really challenging. But
it is. Yeah.
You shouldn't throw your hands up.
No. Just keep chugging away. There are people in your corner that get it and understand, and together, I think we can make it happen. And it is making progress. I still get messages every now and then saying, "Hey, we're making a breakthrough here. We've changed this thing, or we changed that." So we're getting there. Just keep at it. All right. Well, thanks, Chris. We'll talk to you again soon.
Have a good one, Fred. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.